Hey there, comic fam. Welcome back to Climbing Comics. In today's sesh, we'll be talking about the first appearance of Swamp Thing. Hey there again, comic fam. Welcome back to Climbing Comics. So today we'll be talking about Swamp Thing's first appearance. He first appeared, I believe, in June 2nd, 1972 in the book House of Secrets, issue number 92. This was by Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson, the writer and the artist of this book. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this book particularly today is because it's actually part of my 2020 goals. So part of my 2020 goals is to collect many of the first appearances of the Justice League Dark members, and the Swamp Thing happens just to be one of the bigger characters on that team. A second reason I wanted to, and I'm very excited to talk about this book, is one of my comic friends, Tina. This is one of her favorite characters. So I was excited to read this book and share some of this story with you all. So this is one of those books where it has that iconic cover, right? Where you see this woman with blonde golden hair. She's brushing her hair. And in the background, you see like peering through her window is like this monstrous character. And that's actually Swamp Thing. So this book is essentially a book with, I believe, 4 stories, right? And the first story of those 4 is the story of Swamp Thing. So you could think of these as like kind of 4 short stories, each about like a couple pages. The Swamp Thing story is only 8 pages, but in this short little story, you find stories about love, lust, loss, betrayal amongst friends, and it's pretty nuts. So how it starts off is the very first page is a splash page, right? It's like a whole page of these 2 brothers, Cain, who lives in the house of mystery, and Abel, who lives in the house of secrets. So here you see one of the brothers telling the other, they're both sitting in a cemetery, and Abel is sitting with this empty sack, and his brother Cain is telling him, hey, if you want to find some courage, maybe you should find a Snape and you should catch him. So they're both kind of sitting there, and this is kind of that intro into the story, because he's basically like, all right, do you want to help Abel catch the Snape? If so, help him find him in any of these stories. So I actually looked up this Snape thing. It's actually it's a fool's errand, right? It's something to kind of tell someone to look for something that's actually not there. And so it was pretty fun to look that up. So this actually reminded me of, if you remember Goosebumps or Tales from the Crypt, those shows, there was a narrator at the very beginning of those shows essentially telling the viewer like what to expect in that story, but he also throws things a little bit off, right? So this was actually a pretty cool way to start the story off. So the very first page, essentially you see 4 panels of the Swamp Thing, and the way this was written is actually it's you could see like there was a lot of thought put into this. So I'll read a couple of the panels itself. So you see Swamp Thing walking through the swamp, essentially walking up towards this house, right? So you'll see him say, I cannot remember the morning anymore, but I know the evening well. I belong to it now, and it cares for me in return, sheltering me, nurturing me, holding me closest within its velvet embrace. The moon is rising now, clawing its way into the sky, a glowing amber tree that casts its disdainful gaze on the murky ooze below, the swamp that is my home. And then you see him hunched over walking. I move slowly through the moss-draped mire, treading a path that's worn smooth from my constant passing, on beyond the shadows and the darkness of trees, twisting tendrils to my inevitable destination. Last scene, you see him look up at this mansion, the edge of the swamp, and the mist-wet old mansion that rises like an aging apparition into the cold expanse of the sky. A stately sanctuary full of bright lights and promises and memories that bring only pain. And then the title, Swamp Thing. So the way this story goes at this point, now we're on like the second page. You see this woman, right? So Her name is Linda Olsen Ridge, right? She's sitting down. Her husband's sitting or standing next to her, trying to offer her something to drink. And he's like, oh, let's toast to our 6-month anniversary. But she has her mind elsewhere. She's like looking around, and you kind of look at her memories, right? So the way the story goes, it kind of goes back and forth between her memories and present day, her memories and present day. So how it goes, essentially, these flashes of memories, right? The first flash goes back to a party when she was actually married to Alex Olsen, right? So this was their anniversary party. You see her current husband right now, Damien, like in the picture as well, congratulating them both on their anniversary. And then you see her giving Alex like a golden bracelet to kind of signify this occasion. And he's like, I'll never take this off, I promise you that. Then you kind of see a flash of, oh, like her being prideful of her being married to this up and coming scientist. And then the next thing is like you see another flash of memory of an explosion in his laboratory. And then her like being shocked. And then another flash of memory of Damien telling her, don't go into the laboratory. Like Alex is gone, basically, right? So after that, you kind of see this flash of memory come back to present time. And then, so the husband, Damien, is there. He's like, have you listened to anything I've said? And she's like, I'm sorry, darling. My mind has been wandering. And then you kind of see this flash of actually the Swamp Thing wandering through the swamp. So Damien's asking her if she feels okay, but she's like, oh, I just feel kind of cold. Maybe I should go retire to my room, essentially, right? So at this time, you see Damien, and you see his flashes of memories back to when he was actually friends and colleagues with Alex Olsen. So he doesn't like Alex because he knows that he was wondering why Alex married Linda when he knew that Damien loved her. So he was always kind of vengeful for that, essentially, right? So you see Damien pour something different into one of their experimental glass containers, right, from their laboratory. So he's the one who caused the explosion, essentially. And then you see a next scene where he's like, all right, Alex actually didn't die from the explosion. So you see him dragging his like kind of unconscious body, Alex's unconscious body, into the swamp. And he's like, all right, I'm just going to leave him there. And then you kind of come back to present time, right? So as you see Linda retire into her room, you see Damien thinking like, she's putting things together. This is not good. I need to look out for my own neck. Linda must die. And I'm like, okay. So essentially what he plans to do is kill her that night, right? So you see a panel where she's brushing her hair, and this is kind of very reminiscent of the very front cover. And then you see through the window, they have a zoom in view of Swamp Thing's eye. So you see the reflection of her brushing her hair, and you see Damien walking into the room. But as Damien's walking into the room, you see him have this syringe. So this syringe is essentially probably full of poison, and that's how he's probably going to kill her, right? So right before that happens, you see this huge crash, and then Swamp Thing jumps into the room, pulls the syringe out of Damien's hands, and then starts strangling Damien, essentially, right? So Damien's struggling, trying to pull away from Swamp Thing, but he's just pulling like these vines and these pieces, right? So essentially, he kills Damien, but at that same time, he's trying to tell Linda, hey, you're safe now. Like, I'm here. It's okay. But you see this one panel where Linda essentially looks like a ghost. Like, she's just pale white. She looks like a ghost, and she looks like the monster in this one, right? So Swamp Thing, or Alex, he's trying to use his voice to tell her that things are okay, but, he hasn't used his voice in so long that nothing came out. So he turns around, walking away so sad because of how his former wife looked at him, right? And then so as he's walking away, you see him walking into the swamp, And then the last panel essentially says, if tears would come, they would. And that's essentially the end. So that's how the Swamp Thing actually finishes up. And then after that, it's basically like 3 other short stories that kind of go over other like completely different stories, but then they're all kind of in that horror genre. So this was actually a pretty good read. I'm actually glad I read it and was able to actually bring this book into my possession. So I've been lucky enough to obtain this book as part of my 2020 goals, and I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I'm able to bring this to you. The way this story is written is very different than a lot of the other superhero type of books, and I'm really glad that I'm kind of venturing off into these types of books. I think what I mentioned in one of my earlier episodes is that kind of going into the horror genre has been very interesting for me. So I definitely recommend reading this book on DC Universe. That's how I was able to read it at first, and that's how I came to really like this book. So I'm really looking forward to reading a lot of the other Justice League Dark members' first appearances. So I think that's essentially it for this week. I'm glad we're going through this process, and definitely recommend reading this book. So essentially, to close this off, so from my comic journey to yours, keep making it your own. Thanks all. Bye. Hey there again, comic fam. So I mentioned before that House of Mystery 92 had 4 stories to it. So the other 3 stories outside of Swamp Thing are as follows. I'll give a short summary for each. The first one is called After I Die. It's about this guy, so his name was Hal Grundy. So his wife had passed away, but he was sitting by her deathbed, and as she passed away, you saw like her staring above at the ceiling at something, and he's like, what do you see? What do you see? But before she could tell him, she had passed away, right? So one of her dying wishes was for her husband to take care of her stepbrother. So stepbrother and him didn't get along that well. And then so this guy Hal Grundy was so obsessed with trying to figure out what Gladys had seen that, he would be paying for medical expenses for random people in the hospital he knew that were on their deathbed, and wanted to talk to them to see what they're going to see before they die. Unfortunately, the one guy that he paid his medical expenses for actually started getting better. So he's so mad that he went to his nephew. He called his nephew a parasite, essentially, because he kept leeching money off of his wife. He went there to try to kill him. So during this tussle, when he approached him, actually this guy Hal Grundy was the one that got shot, because they were tussling, and then he's the one that got shot. And then so the stepbrother Maxwell, James, Hal's like, come closer, let me tell you what I see. And then he told him what he saw, and then this guy Maxwell James actually saw the reflection of what he saw in his eye, and then this guy just went crazy. And then so essentially what the guy says at the end is, even if Hal Grundy is granted a moment of sanity, would it be wise to listen to what's beyond the last gasp of life? Perhaps some mysteries are better left unsolved. So that was the first story. Second story, It's Better to Give. So there's this guy, Smiling Sam, who lives in this dumpster area. He hears this kid crying, and then he's like, hey kid, why are you crying? And the kid was like, oh, I guess I lost this balloon that my aunt and uncle gave me. They're gonna be so mad. So this guy, Smiling Sam, is basically homeless, right? So he gives the kid his last 10 cents, and he's like, it's okay, I'll just go to I'll go somewhere to get some food. Just take this and then get yourself another balloon. So soon after that, since he's in this dumpster area, or this kind of junkyard, he sees this tub, and all these dimes start falling out of this tub. So Smiling Sam just goes around, starts giving money to Salvation Army, starts giving money around to people that had helped him, got new clothes, and then as he got new clothes, one of these I I guess hoodlums like who was walking around the street saw that he came up with some money. So he's like, all right, I'm gonna rob him. So as this guy's trying to rob Smiley and Sam, you kind of see the kid come up with the balloon, and he's like, hey, what are you doing to my friend? And then so this red balloon kind of moves towards the guy who's trying to rob Smiley and Sam, and then engulfs him. And then essentially it just like engulfs his whole body. And then this kid takes this needle and pops a balloon, and the guy just disappears. So the very last panel is essentially the narrator saying, well, what can I tell you? Maybe it's better to give than to receive, especially when you're on the receiving end from a baby warlock. So, third story, called Trick or Treat. Essentially, this guy steals this painting. And apparently this painting is something that they said if you complete this canvas, it'll change your life, right? And this guy's like, all right, I've been down on my luck. I need to steal this canvas because I need my life to be changed. And it's essentially like a paint by number canvas, because they're like, if you paint and you connect all the numbered dots, your life will be changed. And then as he kept drawing it, I guess like this weird monster figure kind of was what he was drawing. And at the end, this is only a 2-page comic. And then in the end, he turns away and he's like, all right, I hope my life will be changed. And behind him, you see walking out of the canvas is what he drew, which is like this demon who has this knife. So I guess those are the 3 other books outside of Swamp Thing that were in House of Mystery 92. They were really fun to read. They're different. They're definitely different, but they were fun. So hopefully I bring more of these types of books to you later on. Thanks all.